Hello, my name is Michael Vigent, and I am the president of the Center for Research Incorporated, a full-service market research and public policy consulting firm located in Meriden, Connecticut. And it's my pleasure today to share with you some insight into the world of polling. Because of its prevalence throughout the political campaigns, an understanding of what polls and what to look for in poll methodology is quite important. To begin, a brief history. In 1824, the first presidential preference poll was conducted by the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania newspaper in the state of Pennsylvania. This was widely considered the first political poll conducted in the United States. Interestingly enough, the newspaper actually measured voter preference in the nearby state of Delaware. However, despite being the first of its kind, the poll results were largely accurate, with Andrew Jackson garnering 70% of the vote and later going on to win the presidential election. After that, political polling was here to stay. So when thinking about creating a national poll, there are important basics that must be kept in mind. To begin, it is necessary to take note of who is conducting the poll and make sure it is by an impartial source and not a specific party that may show favoritism. Sample size is another aspect of significance. The sample size must be large enough to reduce the margin of error and provide accurate results that are representative of the entire country. Based on current events, the timing of a national poll can skew the information collected. If topics being covered in the national poll have recently made headlines, people's opinions may be swayed. Lastly, the types of questions asked and answers allowed are important to national poll because something as simple as wording can manipulate results. For example, when asking a respondent how they would rate a presidential candidate's experience, if you use a scale of excellent, very good, good, poor, you allow more opportunities for a respondent to provide a positive response as opposed to a negative response, or what we call an imbalanced scale. Now let me add a couple of additional points about sample size for a national poll, which goes to the heart of the poll's viability. As I mentioned, it must be large enough to ensure the poll is going to collect accurate results, and a good rule of thumb is that any sample less than 400 respondents should automatically raise a red flag. In most national polls, which are telephone polls, random digit dialing, or RDD sampling, is the most common way to go about random sampling. In using that method, you also want to ensure each state is represented based on their population. For example, a national poll that boasts 20% of its sample from Iowa, while only 8% coming from Californians, will not provide an accurate reflection of the nation's population. Another obstacle in conducting a viable poll today is the rise of advanced technologies and the popularity of cell phones. Believe it or not, while many people still do not have or use a cell phone, an average of 30% of the country are now considered cell phone-only households. Thus, they cannot be randomly reached on their home phone. This number varies by state, with some states having almost half of their population only having a cell phone in the home. There are questions about whether this trend influences polls because of the characteristics of people who have given up their landline phones. Now, good polls can be defined by certain characteristics. For example, the way questions are worded must be approached in a nonpartisan manner. Questions should be worded in a clear and neutral fashion in order to find out how respondents think, and taking care not to influence their ideas. You want to avoid what are called leading questions. Typically, a good poll will also involve screening questions at the beginning of the survey to determine a qualified respondent. Some popular national polls you may be aware of include the Quinnipiac poll or the Gallup Public Opinion poll, both of which survey 1,000 registered voters over the age of 18 in order to gain information regarding upcoming elections. The Gallup poll also conducts a student poll among students grades 5 through 12 in an effort to learn about the opinion of youths across the country. Finally, it is most important to remember polls are just that, they're polls. And while researchers like us work tirelessly to create the strongest polls with the most accurate results, they may or may not reflect the real-time results of an election or referendum. The political process is highly valued by the American population, and in many cases, individuals want to keep their real opinions and values, and more importantly, their votes, to themselves. Since no polls are conducted with respondents under oath, we cannot assume the answers provided in a poll also find their way into a ballot box. For example, the always popular exit polls, or polls conducted with individuals immediately after leaving the voting booth, predicted a John Kerry presidential victory in the 2004 election 51% to 48%, a similar margin that he actually lost by. So as the upcoming election approaches, it is important to remember both the value and limitations of polls. And, as with all news, it is important to gather your information from a variety of sources and form your own opinions. So on behalf of my staff and the Center for Research, I want to thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in November.